Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am really happy to have you join us for the launch of this strategic action plan. It is work that many people dedicated energy and love to, and I'm really pleased that it's now out. You will have access to some people who will be talking about not necessarily the strategic action plan, but issues that are linked to that. One of the elements that I also wanted to tell you is that it is a 45-minute meeting, and we've already lost a couple of minutes. So for question and answers, please enter them in the question and answer section. And if we have not got time to answer the questions, we indicate who you would like to ask the question to, and we will try to direct the question to the person who's the best ability to respond. Use the chat, etc., and please tweet as much as you want to, because it's not under the rule. I will now ask Robin Niblett. I've given the director of Chatham House the heavy lifting, as he mentioned earlier, to actually take us through this very swiftly, 45 minutes. And Robin, it is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephane. And I don't mind doing heavy lifting for something like this, because it's just very positive. I don't know if I can use the word exciting in this COVID environment, but it is really good to feel that we, as an institute, with your support, are helping deliver some positive ideas for how to emerge from this crisis stronger, hopefully, than we went into it. I say hopefully because I do not discount or underestimate the huge challenges before us on, in particular, the issue of our whole gender inclusive growth initiative, which has been such a focus for Chatham House for the last 7+ years. And really wonderful to have all of you with us today. I know that many of you joining us today are people who are actively involved in helping us put together the strategic action plan that Stephane referenced a few minutes ago, and which is now formally up on our website. But just to give you the sense, what we want to do is use this launch event to get some really good comments, thoughts, contributions on board, in particular from the folks who will be speaking, but also some of the questions from you, and then start to put this together in a package that we can start to distribute to our various communities. And Stephane will say something more about it later on. Normally, we would have had by now our Gender Inclusive Growth Forum. This has been pushed off for obvious reasons to an online event on the 1st and 2nd of December. But I know many of you on this call participated in the 5 roundtables and a 3-day workshop, over that 3-day workshop that really took place on trying to get these ideas together. 90 individuals from private sector, from civil society, international organizations, etc. Many thanks to all of you who contributed your ideas, your experience, your thoughts. I remember the title of this report now is The COVID-19 Gender Gap, How Women's Experience and Expertise Will Drive Economic Recovery. And we've really drawn on your expertise and your experience to come up with these ideas. And I think Dr. Obeid, she may be on the call. I've not had a chance yet to open up my participants list. But as chair of the Women 20, and therefore the role that is going into the G20, W20 process, we were thrilled to have her be part of this and to have our ideas shared with her ahead of the summit that will be taking place on the 20th to 22nd of October. What I want to just do very quickly at the front end is remind you that we structured our ideas, I suppose, for this report that was put together by Stephane and by Elizabeth, who I will be talking to in a few minutes, around 3 big themes: investment in social infrastructure and family-friendly policies, creating that context that would remove barriers for women's continued and hopefully increased contribution to economic activity. And it's really those caring social spaces of child and long-term care, healthcare, and social protection. Second, the focus on women having the right competencies and the importance of vocational education, as well as primary, secondary, etc. education. The importance of women having the skills and access to the capacity, therefore, to do all they can in this post-COVID environment. And finally, how do we ensure women's entrepreneurship? How do we make sure that women-owned businesses can be successful around the world, so women really have a stake, their own stake, in driving global economic growth? So those were the kind of three big themes around which we've grouped our reports. And I want to turn now in my snappish contributions for 3 or 4 minutes with Julie Teigland, I think known to all of you here, certainly anyone who's been involved in our Gender Inclusive Growth Initiative, because Julie and her colleagues at EY have been with us supporting this initiative from the get-go. Julie is now the area managing partner for EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, Africa, India in the middle of that as well, which is, I think, one of the largest, components of EY. The first lady to hold that role, first woman to hold that role, so incredibly important role as well, and the chair of the EY Global Leader Women Fast Forward. So, Julie, just great to have you with us right now, and I'm wondering, maybe cut to the chase. Are you worried that we're going backwards? And we're releasing this report to try to give forward motion, but I think everyone on this call, and it was certainly a theme as I participated in the roundtables, it really is a worry that we're being knocked backwards. What's your sense at the moment?
Robin, I completely agree. I fought for years for women's economic empowerment and gender equality, and I feel that the pandemic has taken us back about a decade. Now, I don't just say that, Robin, or take those statements lightly. I'd like to bear it with facts. Do you know that women during the pandemic are working 3 to 4 times increased hours during the last 10 months? Number 2, do you know that men during this pandemic have a 3 times more likely rate to be promoted than women during the crisis of the last 10 months? 3 times. Number 3, do you know that nearly 20% of the women working together have stepped back and considered taking off their employment to be able to care for family members, homeschool, and take care of elderly during this pandemic? So not only do the women that we have in the employment are 3 times less likely to be promoted, 20% of them are leaving the workforce entirely to take care of family workers. And the ones that remain, Robin, are working 3 times more hours than they did in the past. Those are some really scary statistics. When you look across, if you would think, Julie, that's really, you're probably only referring to the emerging markets and microfinance like India. I can say, do you know in the US alone, 1 million women, female workers dropped from the employee workforce in September 2020 alone? Robin, I'm really worried. We're going backwards on all levels, both in the sense of equal pay, but also in the sense of equal opportunity across the board. And if you think that our GDP is hit merely because of the pandemic, I can say that you're wrong. It's equally hit because we're missing the force of women contributing to that GDP growth across the board.
So, I mean, and it's hard not, there's very powerful statistics. And as you said, this is across developed as much as emerging markets. And as in so many other areas of the global economy, there's a real fear that we're going backwards. So again, to cut absolutely to the chase, what issues are you focused on the most, therefore, to try to stop this negative leaching of the positive steps that have been taken, but to try to almost turn it into some type of positive forward movement? What are you guys up to, and what do you think we should be focused on in this process?
So, Robin, I'm really proud to lead EY and be a leader that sits on our global executive. We're focused on 3 things. Number 1, and I'll try to go in the context of your report and your recommendations. I really believe that we have both an opportunity and a danger to step up women in the area of digital skills across the board. Digital skills will enable our workforce or women to be contributing to the workforce no matter where they live, no matter where they work. They can work remotely now if they have access to the right skills. And a lot of those skills, Robin, can be given in a virtual environment. So we have a threat that we're losing women from the workforce. We have an opportunity to engage with them both remotely and also flexibly if we can get them the right skill set. EY is really working with partnering with the Equals group to really push on getting differentiated and better skills beyond just digital literacy to girls and women across the globe. Number two, I really believe in women entrepreneurship. Women are the foundation of our economies, especially in some of the emerging markets, but clearly not limited to the emerging markets. EY runs a very powerful program focused on winning women and supporting entrepreneurship with networking, with education, with mentoring, with skills that we're doing that. We're doing that today in 50 countries. I can only encourage others to get on board and ensure that women have the right support when it comes to entrepreneurship. It's a fuel feeder for the economy. And number three, I believe in connected with number one and number two of making sure that women have the right skills and are supported, and women entrepreneur businesses are flourishing. I'm really proud that we are focused on driving positive procurement commitments, which says, Robin, we as EY are willing to invest with procurement. We made a commitment to invest $100 million this past year in 2020. We've now exceeded that to $300 million for women-based entrepreneurial businesses or women-led businesses. I would encourage all of us to get on board with us and support the work that we're doing in ensuring that women's businesses are actually flourishing and contributing to our economies. It's definitely circular, Robin. It gives back across the board.
That's wonderful. No, thank you. And I think this point of we're going to have to put money where our mouth is, in a sense. Otherwise, change is not going to happen simply through exhortation, especially at this time when there are so many headwinds. So, Julie, look, again, thanks very much for all your support. And thank you for giving us some antidotes to the very bracing but truthful comments about the environment we're in. I can see some really useful comments coming in on the chat line and some questions already coming in the Q&A. Now, we're only 3 minutes behind, which is pretty good so far. But we are going to turn right now, if the technology all works, to watch a video of the making of the Strategic Action Plan, which actually will give a voice to many of the people on this call who were instrumental in helping us pull it together. So, Katie, behind the scenes, over to you.
The crisis has revealed that our existing society model built in inequalities is not sustainable.
COVID put humanity basically at a crossroads.
As bad as this crisis is, it also presents us, a very unique opportunity to reimagine.
This moment right now is the moment to question norms.
We want to take this opportunity to build fairer, to build better.
Women are saving the world right now in so many different ways through their different roles.
We have 740 million women working in the informal economy globally with no paid sick leave or family leave, no health insurance or no social security.
Women are becoming unemployed at a massively greater rate.
We have more older women living in poverty than men.
Right now, women we see are extremely vulnerable because they have little or no cash reserves.
Countries around the world cannot achieve their full potential if half of their population is not able to participate fully.
We've got to start with equal access.
We need to have women at every level of the decision-making process.
We have to think about taxation and taxation of wealth.
The current COVID-19 crisis has shown the importance of the care economy.
We need to start talking about care as an investment, not as a cost.
Providing the resources for childcare or parental leave.
Free universal childcare for all.
Access to flexible working opportunities.
Universal health is absolutely a top priority.
Financial education for girls and young women.
If we don't have
education for women. If we don't have a woman's voice heard, it'll affect the entire world.
Education for women in the entrepreneurial space.
Access to finance, access to networks.
More ways to incentivize digital finance.
Greater transparency and traceability in supply chains as it relates to inclusion.
Digital empowerment of women producers is going to be key.
To put together a best practice showcase of good and best practices, starting with G20 countries.
To understand your own unconscious biases.
So listening to voices of men who are already doing many of the things that we would like men to do, how then might we change policies as a result?
Strengthen anti-discrimination legislation.
Government must include domestic workers in labor law protection and social protections. Domestic work is work.
Eliminating gender-based violence.
These are the solutions that we're going to have to put in place to shift the needle around the world.
I can see the credits going up, and I'm going to let them keep going because there's many of the people who helped us make this report together, and I don't want to interrupt it, but I'm also keeping an eye, as I must do, on the time. So thank you very much, Katie, for posting that up, and just wonderful to see all of those comments being shared then with all of us, and a lot of the good ideas we've discussed already, the informal economy, Michelle Bachelet reminding us how much women make up that part of the economy without which the rest of the economy would not be able to function. The focus on universal healthcare, big priority for Chatham House, and Rob mentioned that. References to education that Julie had mentioned, and many of you have mentioned in the chat line as well. Best investment practices. And we've already had one question about what we can do to get women, really support women entrepreneurs from Anne in the chat line as well. So what I'm going to say here is that we've already got a strong agenda. My job is to turn now to Elizabeth Isele, who co-drafted, authored the report with Stephane to get our strategic action plan in place. As I think you all know, she's obviously a regular in our work, but also such a supporter and inspiration to other parts of this process and all of the groups that are referenced here in this project and in this project that we've undertaken. She's founder and CEO of the Global Institute for Experienced Entrepreneurship, and we're proud to say also an associate fellow of our Gender Inclusive Growth Initiative. Again, we've got so little time, Elizabeth, but I thought, what are the 2 or 3 examples that you saw, that you incorporated into this paper, that you think could drive positive change? Because I think what's great about this paper, it's not just a whole series of top line recommendations, it's really gone into the example of where examples are working. Share a couple of those with us if you can.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you to all of you attending today, and of course the many of the 80 participants that took real action steps in the forum. And if just to follow up on what Julie said of the 1 million women in the United States who have dropped out of the labor force, that is 4 times the number of men who have exited the labor force. And so what we are now referring to as the recession of this economic crisis, we have really dubbed it the she-session of the economic crisis. And we need to get these women back into work and back into contributing. And it's not just something nice to do for them. We know that they contribute over 12 million to global GDP. And excuse me, what we have also found is that Princeton University studies have indicated that men dominate 75% of the conversation at board meetings. And then they do that, they control the discourse. So unless women figure out how to break through, we will not control or really participate in the discourse. So what this forum is really a breakthrough model of how inclusion can work. 80 women and a few good men brought their brain power to the room, and you saw examples of that. So this was an extraordinary challenge to create this action plan as a document that we could share all of that brain power with all of you, indeed with all of the world. Those 80 people represented the top and the bottom of the pyramid, different ages, races, ethnicities from every continent in the world except for Antarctica. And the individuals, as Robin said, this was not wishful thinking or top level theorizing about this situation. Each of them presented extraordinary ideas and examples, which in turn were then examined by the other 80 participants. It wasn't just if someone brought a great idea to the table and an example that with this would go into the report. We examined all of those ideas and examples and then prioritized them to determine first, which were the most readily implementable, and second and equally important, is which would create the greatest impact where everyone will benefit equally. Women in the forum and those few good men responded in the ways they often do by stepping up and they say, okay, now what? Let's unpack this, let's get it done, and let's convert the solutions into actions. I won't repeat the three strategies that have been gone over, but what I would like to do is present some of the examples of how those strategies work. And of course, the most important, the number one issue for allowing people to get back into the workforce or re-enter the workforce is affordable childcare, affordable and quality childcare. And while there are a number of great quality childcare programs across the world, we really wanted to take a moment to honor the Quebec example, which is a long-running initiative that served as a blueprint for a number of innovative interventions around the world. It was launched more than 20 years ago and has succeeded not only in raising the workforce participation of women to 86%, but the most really innovative part of it is it was designed so that it's paying for itself. This isn't some welfare program for the women of Quebec. Bringing the women of Quebec back into the workforce increased the tax revenue collected from working women, combined with the corresponding reduction in the number of families receiving social benefits, more than covers the cost of the entire program. And in fact, lately, there is even a net gain in the government's savings. Another initiative that we highlighted in the examples was in terms of accelerating advances in women's workforce competencies through professional and vocational training. The extraordinary Barefoot College International program in India called the Solar Mamas, which was and is a scheme that targets illiterate or semi-literate older women using sign language and color codes and turns them into engineers so that they can install solar wiring, they can install wiring solar systems throughout India. And over the past years, not only in India, but several other countries as well. And in fact, 93 countries in which they have installed maybe over 18,000 houses to solar capacity. And then we talk about, of course, the investing in the development of women-owned businesses in all countries. In the US, the Kaufman Foundation has documented that 100% of new net job creation comes from new business startups. So again, this is not just having women have entrepreneurship as a vehicle to promote their own economic independence, but it is driving GDP, it's driving community economies forward in ways that are often discounted and cannot be. Over the centuries, women, as we've discussed, have exercised authorities in places where we learn the most important life lessons. And that could be the classroom, the place of worship, the marketplace, the kitchen table. And now we believe it's time that they have the opportunity to exercise that same in the corporate and political worlds. As we came out of the forum, we said gender inclusion is cutting edge common sense backed up by scientific data. And I'll let the report speak for itself, but there's just many, many examples of how this can work in developing countries as well as developed countries. Just extraordinary examples given by the people and, as I say, examined by each one of us in that room to move inclusion forward. And it's an extraordinary accomplishment, and I am very proud to have been a part of it. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, and thanks for being able to get some really specific 3 sets of examples there. We've had a couple of questions in the chat line about how they can get access to those examples. I think they are all referenced in the paper itself, but if not, we'll be able to get you links afterwards as well, so you can really go into more detail on the points that Elizabeth highlighted. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thanks very much for all your contributions to this project. I'm going to move straight on swiftly because we've got 3 more speakers to go, each of them bringing really important dimensions to this conversation. The first, and I'm just delighted to welcome him also to this call, is Chief Justice David Maraga, who's the Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court of Kenya. And it's a real honor that you would take time to join us today, Chief Justice. I know that you play an important role in a number of dimensions, obviously in your country, but one of the ones that has captured most attention for us, as you could imagine in the context of this project, is the advice that you've given to the President of Kenya, to President Kenyatta, to dissolve Parliament, because it has not enacted the 2/3 gender rule that is written into the 2010 Constitution. In other words, that no gender would be represented over 2/3 within Parliament. I'm not going to ask you, as you can imagine, at all to comment on anything that's before the court at the moment. But I'm just wondering, from your experience, how can we encourage more women into decision-making positions, especially in those decisions that affect the future of their lives, such as politics, such as law? What have you learned? What are the lessons you could share with this group about compliance, about accountability, about targets, anything you care to share with us at this time? And again, thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Robin, for this opportunity to be a participant in this important function. And as I've said and indicated before, my advisories before the court once again, being challenged by quite a number of petitions, so I will avoid whatever is before the court, and I am sure you understand that. It is not in dispute, Robin, that women have unique leadership qualities that men don't have. That one, I think, is an accepted fact. And it is also important that any group of the society should also be involved in matters that involve them. In Kenya, the participation of women has been quite low in parliament, despite the fact that women are slightly over half the Kenyan population. Their representation in parliament is 23.3%. Because of this and because of cultural settings like and traditions like patriarchy and difficulties in being able to mount a successful election campaign to be elected, it was thought wise to have provisions in the Constitution that require Parliament to come up with legislation that can give women a chance to participate in leadership. This is in our Constitution, and the Constitution required that within 5 years from 27th of August 2010, Parliament should enact legislation that would enable women to get at least 1/3 of the seats in Parliament. The Constitution goes on to state that if Parliament failed to do that, any Kenyan or any person would petition the court to direct that the Parliament does that. Parliament didn't do that, and people went to court. Despite 4 court orders, Parliament didn't do that. The Constitution further states that if after a court has issued an order directing Parliament to do that and it doesn't, then the Chief Justice should advise the President to dissolve Parliament. This is an enforcement provision which is quite unique, and it was deliberately put in our constitution, because it was feared that without that kind of sanction, Parliament was not going to enact the required legislation. So when the matter came, and I had about six petitions. In fact, there are others which had not come to me as at the time I was writing the ruling. I found that I had no choice. In fact, the wording of the Constitution states in mandatory terms that I should advise the president to dissolve Parliament, which is what I did. Now, what is the message here? The message here is that this is a constitutional imperative that has got to be complied with. The reason for that is because of the cultural setting, women are not going to be able to get into Parliament. So the Constitution itself requires that affirmative action by legislation has to be taken. And I think it is quite in order, because quite a number of other African states, South Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, in fact, is the best in the world, which has a very high percentage.
Maybe I will move forward, just conscious of how limited we are on time. Chief Justice Moraga, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but if you can, just let us know when you're back. But for the moment, I'm going to use, all right, hold on.
Yes, sorry. These other countries which have succeeded in having raised the women representation have done it by quotas, proportional representation by quotas, and creating special seats for women to be able to participate. And it has been achieved. As I said, six African countries have achieved that. So I can't see any problem, and I think that's the way to go. Patriarchy is a notion which is all over the world. My reading of the situation is that only women world over occupy only 23.7%. So there must be a concerted action taken by way of quotas and creating special positions for women to be in leadership positions. That's the only way women's voice can be heard, and they bring the perspectives. You have quite a number of the other speakers have said how women contribute to the economy of the country. I don't need to repeat that. Women, especially in the African context, contribute a lot. They work a lot to bring up the family. They work a lot to feed the family. They are involved in the education of children. They are the ones who push children to study. So those are leadership qualities that we should not ignore in the 21st century. In my view, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice, and thanks for both the example you're setting and your leadership, if I may say, which is so important for us. Really, really, it's brave leadership, which is in short supply these days. I'll simply put it that way, but I don't want to say more than that because I know you're in a very delicate and important position. So thank you very much for that. What I do want to do, because I know we've got Annalise Dodds joining us shortly, I do want to turn right now to just one very quick question, Julie, to you, because I had it down here a minute ago and I got it in the chat line where Stephane Enyon, I think it was, asked the question, do voluntary standards work in the private sector? Do you have like a short answer you could give to that, Julie? Do you think voluntary standards in terms of getting the right quotas numbers is the right route in the private sector? We're hearing a call from Chief Justice Moraga for quotas in the public sector. What's your view on the private sector?
You know what, I think, Robin, I do think voluntary standards can work if companies are mandatorily required to report on them.
Simple, clean answer. And I hope that's one of our recommendations, Elizabeth, Stephane. If it isn't, it should be. Right. Marion, let me turn to you now. Thank you for waiting very patiently here. Marion, as I think you know from your agendas, project manager at the Women's Budget Group. They've laid out a report of which she is the author from their Commission on a Gender Equal Economy in the UK on creating a sharing economy, a call to action, this idea of a sharing economy being so important in today's environment. Marion, you'll appreciate we've got limited time, but I know you've got some really interesting data that I think will help mobilize us and motivate us a little bit in this work. And there might be one or two key conclusions you'd like to share with us as well. But I'll keep an eye on the time, and you'll remember my crab clause. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Robin. It's great to be here. So in my few minutes, I just wanted to share some highlights of polling that we did at the UK Women's Budget Group a few weeks ago, which coincided with, as Robin said, the launch of our report, the final report of our Commission on a Gender Equal Economy. And the report is entitled Creating a Caring Economy, a Call to Action. So Katie's pulled up the slides already, which is great. Can we just go to the first slide, please, Katie? I think this is a little bit further down. The polling that was conducted across the UK a few weeks ago shows really strong public support for urgent changes to the UK economy, and in particular, an increased focus on care. And some of the stats are on this slide. If we just go to the next one along, please, Katie, that's the one, fantastic. And as I've pulled out a few stats here, and more, of course, are in our report and on our website, details of which are on the last slide, so you can check those out too. I've grouped the results of the polling here into 3 categories. So in the turquoise box, we can see support across the UK for an increased focus on well-being and getting a better balance in life. In the yellow box, we can see support for gender equality, particularly in encouraging men to provide more care. And now, interestingly, that's the case among both women and men, with really high levels of support for this among men aged 18 to 44. Where nearly 3/4 of men agreed that the government should encourage and financially support men to provide more care. So it's really, really interesting, the stats coming out here. And in the blue box there at the bottom, we can see some support for specific policy proposals that the Commission made, particularly in investing in social infrastructure, such as social care, health and education, and also around making sure that social care is accessible based on needs and not wealth. So we can see these, these high levels of support here, real appetite for change. So, of course, the question is, how do we put this into practice? So if we go to the next slide, I will talk you through briefly the vision of a caring economy that the Commission on a Gender Equal Economy developed. So this vision of a caring economy is one which simultaneously achieves gender equality, sustainability, and well-being, as we can see in this diagram here. So what does that look like in practice? I'll give you an example. If we look at investment in paid care services, investment in paid care services will improve well-being through meeting people's care needs. It will improve gender equality because it creates more jobs, particularly for women, which closes the gender employment gap. So we've done modelling to show that investing 1% of GDP in the care sector would create 2.7 times as many jobs in the economy overall as an equivalent investment in the construction sector. And that's 6.3 times as many jobs for women and 1.1 times as many jobs for men. And finally, investment in paid care services is sustainable because investing in care is 3 times less polluting per job created overall than the equivalent investment, again, in the construction industry. So that's a kind of snapshot, an example of what a caring economy means in practice. But of course, a caring economy goes beyond investment in paid care services. It's about prioritising care of one another and the environment in which we live. It's about ensuring that everyone has time to care as well as time free from care. And it enables men to share provision of unpaid care equally with women. So paid care services are crucial, but a caring economy does go beyond this. And indeed, it covers the entirety of the economy more broadly. And the final report of the Commission on a Gender Equal Economy reflects this. So if we go to the next slide, please, Katie. The final report of the Commission shows here that a caring economy means reconceptualizing what we mean by the economy, reorientating our fiscal and monetary policy towards a caring economy, looking at paid and unpaid work, spanning social security, public services, tax, right up into the global economic and trade system. So it really does touch on everything. And our report details what changes need to be made across these different areas, and that we've categorized them here into these 8 steps. And I think importantly also the report details where progress is already underway. For example, looking at Scandinavian investment in the care sector, businesses which offer equal parental leave, such as Aviva, the insurance company, and governments which have adopted a wellbeing approach to economic policy, such as Scotland, Wales, New Zealand, and Iceland. So there we have it. I'll wrap up there. Not only would a caring economy bring us all countless benefits in terms of well-being, balance, and making genuine choices, but people want to see these changes, as the polling showed us. It makes economic sense, looking at the higher returns to investment in care. And progress is already underway, which we can learn from and build on to create a caring economy which works for everyone. So now it's just up to us to make this happen. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the polling and through our report. I can pop the details of the report in the chat now.
That'd be wonderful, Marion, if you can. And we're just proving here that women can be far more time efficient in many cases than men can. Though I think actually the men on this call are doing a pretty good job as well, I will simply say. But really exciting report. To have that kind of confirmation through your polling data, a lot of the instincts and the policies and the examples that have been developed through the roundtables and the reflected in the action plan creates a really complementary space. I think your reference to the caring economy matches what we discussed in one of our earlier discussions about the insufficiency of the wonderful shovel-ready approach to work, which is a classic kind of, I'll say it, male way of thinking that you're going to dig your way out of a hole, which is what we tend to dig into quite often ourselves. So I would simply say, I think having that data and those examples you've given is really exciting. Thank you, Marion, and thanks for sharing it with us. And good luck with your report. I'm now delighted to welcome Anneliese Dodds to the call. Anneliese Dodds, as I think you all know, is Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. The first woman to hold the position of Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, which again I think is just another good sign. You missed a little bit of our conversation with David Maraga, the Chief Justice of the Kenyan Supreme Court, Anneliese, but he was talking about the steps that have been trying to take to get women into political life, and obviously the struggles that take place in many parts of the world. But Julie Teaglin from EY was talking earlier on about the steps that have gone backwards in terms of women's economic opportunity, not just in the developing world, but very much in the developed world as well. She gave some pretty horrifying statistics of what's going on in the US. And I'm just wondering, Anneliese, where you'd like to come in on your approach, whether it's the Labour Party's approach or just your own personal insights on where you think we should be putting the maximum effort right now to make sure we don't go backwards and we have a chance even to step further forwards in 2-3 years' time. Really up to you. I know we've got limited time and we're a little over the closing time, but you can be with us a few more minutes. Hopefully Julie can. We'll be finished in 5 to 10 max. Over to you, Anneliese.
Thank you very much indeed, Robin, and I'm extremely sorry that I was so late on the call. Today has ended up as just about every day in the UK being slightly chaotic with new announcements around the current crisis. So apologies for that. And it's really good to see Marion, and I've been following the work of the Women's Budget Group very closely in the UK, and indeed I think the overall action plan is a very exciting way of looking at these different challenges. I think the first and most important thing we must do is recognise the fact that this crisis is impacting on women as well as men. So often women are totally absent from the debate around the crisis and the particular problems that women face, and I would say often related to their status as carers, but not always in that relationship. In fact, a few months ago, there was an announcement made by government with guidance provided to people about how they should behave with coronavirus. There was more in that guidance about how people could play tennis than how parents would be able to go to work when their children were still kept home from school. And of course, it was mainly women who were having to look after those children. Continues to be mainly women who are affected by problems with the childcare system that are ongoing in the UK currently, and a real crisis around financing childcare that's occurring right now. So we need to make sure that women are recognised within this and their challenges are recognised within these debates and discussions. A big part of that is recognising that often what's viewed as counting is what is measured. And there is a challenge, I think, currently we're seeing, for example, in the UK, that some of the assessment of divergences in pay for men and women has been suspended because of the crisis for what might be to an extent a laudable aim, which is to reduce the regulatory burden on businesses as they're facing up to this crisis and all the needs for compliance. But we still need to know what's going on within the labour market. We do know that particularly for those at the lowest paid level, really is very, very difficult sets of circumstances indeed. Often we find it would be women who would be combining paid work with some support from social security. Arguably, this crisis is shining a very strong light on the inadequacies of that social security in a number of different countries. It's leading, I would say, to people comparing their nation to others in terms of the availability of support, which is quite exciting. It does mean there's potential for change. But of course, there are big, big problems there we've got to deal with. Just finally, around the stimulus, I mean, I would really agree with what's being said. I think there's often an assumption that in and of themselves, major construction projects will necessarily lead to sustainable economic growth. That's not necessarily the case if we don't actually see, from my point of view, sufficient conditionality placed on those projects, but also if they're not the projects that will actually lead to a change in people's quality of life. Lots of money can be spent on them, but they won't necessarily be altering people's circumstances. If, for example, people can't afford to travel by train, if the jobs that they need to get to aren't available by train, but they are by local buses, then there's no point really in putting in some of those shiny new railway stations. But of course, we also need to consider employment through a whole range of professions as well. And so the work that's been done around the positive fiscal impact of essentially providing decent pay to people who work in social care, I think is very, very germane here. And certainly my party is saying that as we emerge from this crisis, we need to have a much more sensible approach to, for example, pay in the social care sector, which is overwhelmingly provided by women. So yeah, sorry, I feel like I've gone on a little bit, but I tried to kind of squeeze into a short space of time a few different points there.
No, actually, you haven't gone on. You've been bang on the amount of time we were hoping you would be able to share your ideas with us. And I think being able to bring it again into the real world of designing stimulus packages right now and trying to get the balance right within them is particularly important. I thought your point about measuring, if you don't measure what the problem is, you can't see what it is and you don't know how to design the solution right. And this business of, well, we need to set things to one side for the moment. It's a bit like environmental changes. This is not the time to step back. It's the time to double down in a way on these commitments. Otherwise, we will not, quote unquote, build back better. So Annelies, those are really helpful comments. We're going to have very little time for Q&A because we're already 6 minutes past 4, and that's at least according to my computer. We said we'd finish at 4, and I know a lot of people have a really hard 4:15 p.m. stop, and I'm worried I'm not going to have time really to get to questions and answers. I do know that Thorea Obeid is on the call. She's sharing the W20 process at the moment, and Thorea, I'm just wondering, as you've got to take some of these ideas into the W20 summit that's upcoming, were there any one or two issues that you've really picked up, either from Annelies, from Justice Moraga, from Marion, or from the comments made by Julie and Elizabeth earlier? Anything that you would really highlight at the moment that you think there's an opportunity to carry forward through this W20 and G20 process?
Well, thank you very much, Robin. Actually, many of what has been said has been adopted in the call to action that the W20 will adopt formally on 20 October, and we're handing it to the presidency of the G20 on the 21st of October. So much of what has been said there, maybe one issue that has not come out very clear, and we thought that W20 would be the most significant, and it was number 1, which is inclusion in decision-making. That in whatever level, whether we're not talking just about ministerial levels, we're talking about levels at every community level, community institutions, government, private sector, boards of companies. If women are not included, then the decisions that are being made are often truncated. They're not complete. And therefore, when women are there, they don't only bring their voice and their concerns, they bring the concerns of their constituency, whether it's the family, the community, or whatever. So I think this is an issue that needs to be emphasized and monitored. And I hope that all this research that's being done and so on would monitor what governments are doing and what companies are doing to bring women into decision-making positions.
Thank you very much. I think it's such an important point because, and it's come up a couple of times in this conversation, it wasn't in our first 3 lines of priority that we mentioned earlier on, but I think it was very much in the commentary that was made there by Justice Moraga and the steps that have been taken, obviously, in many countries of the world to actually set quotas and targets, which can then be monitored and acted upon. And if you don't have those targets, how can you monitor them, as you yourself said? I have to say, just if I can inject my own personal note here, I'm concerned that here we are at this pivotal moment of trying to design reconstruction, stimulus, building back, whatever term you want to use. But in many cases, the decision-making structures had not yet adapted in time. So the building back is going to be done in many cases without women in the decision-making processes. I don't think it's a party political statement to say that I've been struck by a lot of the star chamber groups, even in the United Kingdom on the political side, have tended to be male-led. I see it in other countries as well. And the question is, this may be one area where the corporate sector has got itself a little ahead of other forms of decision-making, both political and more broadly in civil society. And I was also involved in a conversation with the British government recently about conflict resolution. It is striking that in the conflicts around the world, the women who are excluded from decision-making in conflict mediation, the women are not at that table. And yet they're the ones who end up suffering in the most extreme ways from their effects. And in many cases, men are going to have to bring them to the table. And you know, it's our job as well to insist, not just the job of women to call and insist. So I just think this is an incredibly important point. Stephane, I know I've got to give you a couple of minutes to be able to say some words at the end. I've been looking at the questions. I really honestly feel actually a lot of them have been answered as we've been going along. We've had some wonderful comments from, and questions, for example, if I don't know if you're pronouncing your name right, Che Van Dijk, where I think we just literally addressed your question in these comments that we just mentioned here. Vanessa Ogden was talking about the role of women in education, or the education of girls. I think we've highlighted what a priority that needs to be. And then Stephanie Enyon, we got to your question, I think there about, about whether the private sector can play an active role in terms of voluntary action. As Julie said, voluntary action is providing you've measured it and you're being held to account and having to report on it. And we've got all sorts of good comments as well. I noted from Anne Ravanova, Dorothy Gordon, Susan Holliday, Maria Mujica, Anne-Marie Morrison. I'm giving all your names because we haven't got time to call on you. I think what we have to do here is give Stephane a chance to wrap up and let her tell us where we're taking things from here. And for me to say a huge thank you to the people who came and joined us as speakers and as commentators and giving us feedback. Annalise, thank you very much for making the time. Marion, Julie, Chief Justice, you're still with us, David Moraga, and obviously Elizabeth and Stephane. I will say a big thank you to both of you because I saw what it was like trying to pull those huge reams of great ideas together that came out of the workshop and the roundtables. I mean, it was not a short amount of information. And I think you've grouped it together in an effective, practical way where people can dive in to particular specific answers, as well as some of the big ideas. So with those thanks, let me turn to Stephane to wrap up. We'll do it in an hour. It'll always be a miracle if we can do all of this in 1 hour. Stephane, over to you.
Thank you very much, Robin. Thank you, all the panelists, Julie, Elizabeth, Chief Justice Moraga, Marion, Annalise, thank you so much. And Thoraya coming. What this raises is the fact that what Robin said at the beginning, this is the launch, this is the beginning, and we need to use that to present these ideas and to build the constituency. Now, I know that the summit of the W20 is coming along. It's another opportunity to continue talking about this. I can see in the chat that there are some issues like Vanessa raising girls, and we forget about girls within the whole issue of COVID-19. No, we don't. We just made a selection. I think this is the beginning of something, and I would really call upon you in this seminar to disseminate the information as much as you can. I think it's only by working with other people. I'm very pleased to have the Women's Budget Group also presented, and also Jérôme was one of the participants. It's only working together that we will get the change. So thank you very much. We are going to have our annual forum on the 1st and 2nd of December, an opportunity to continue the conversation. And we're trying to organize a series of meetings on these issues in different geographies. So it's a beginning. So thank you so much. And for the ones calling from Korea and all that, please go to bed. Thank you so much for being there.
And thank you again, Stephane, to you. We'll share all of that good information in the chat line with folks afterwards as well.
Absolutely.
We didn't have a chance to look at all.
And if
great ideas.
We will look, I'm sorry, we'll look at the questions. If some were not answered, we'll try to field them so that you get an answer.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. All the best. See you again soon. Great work.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone.